Oh, in Winnipeg, yeah. Born and raised in Winnipeg, went to elementary, junior high, high school right there, played football, flipped hamburgers, delivered newspapers, all of that. And at the age of 17, joined the Canadian Armed Forces. You see, I was lucky in the sense that I had a really supportive family. My father passed away when I was 9 years old. And so my uncle and aunt loved camping, fishing, and that kind of thing. So right from about the age of 8, 9 years old, I would not spend a lot of time on the prairie, but rather drive east across the border into Ontario and go fishing, camping, tenting around Kenora, Lake of the Woods, like almost every weekend. I mean, we had so much freedom and flexibility to do things. And there was all kinds of opportunity. And so I was, as I mentioned, delivering newspapers from the age of 10, playing football in high school, lied about my age, and I started flipping hamburgers at 15. At the age of 16, I became an assistant manager at the restaurant, all the while going to Air Cadets, which was really my introduction to the Canadian Armed Forces, was through cadet program. Did a number of summer courses with them. But in that whole backdrop of Winnipeg that just provided so much opportunity to me. Great high school, Daniel McIntyre High School. And from there prepared me to go to military college. Before my father passed away, I was in Cub Scouts, and then I went into Boy Scouts, and that was interesting. But I always wanted to be a pilot. And I was, especially after my father passed away, and before he did, I heard all of the war stories. My father was a Polish combatant. He had survived the gulags of Siberia and lost a lot of his family in that situation, joined the Free Polish Army. And so in our household, while he was alive, all of his battle buddies would come over to the house and just reminisce and support each other. So that kind of created an interest in me for the Air Force and flying. So I thought I wanted to be a pilot, and one of my buddies was going down to this Air Cadet thing, so I thought I'd give it a go. I was 13, just turned 13. And so I signed up, and I loved it. And again, in addition to delivering newspapers, playing football in high school, like I was a pretty busy kid. And I found that each of these were building blocks, and it assisted me in creating the kind of wild character I am. But I like the structure, like the discipline, like the high standards of Air Cadets. I found out later on that I could not be a pilot. I had a little bit of a color vision issue that prevented me from pursuing a career as a pilot. But I kind of like the drill, the leadership, the opportunity to stand in front of folks and say, hey, let's do this. And I really liked teaching. And so I thought, I might just continue to pursue that. Really, it was a decision about trying to attend university from a perspective of a family environment where we didn't have a lot of money. And when my father passed away, we were on social welfare. And it was different rules in those days. You couldn't have a car, you had a limit in your bank account, like there was a lot of limits. And so one of the reasons I did all of this work, delivering papers, flipping burgers, was actually to bring money into the household. And the first car we had was the car I bought as a 16-year-old. I bought it for $100. So going to the military and military college was actually kind of like a scholarship, and it allowed me to afford an education, and so that was the start. So I attended Royal Roads Military College in Victoria, British Columbia for 2 years, and again, coming out of Manitoba, where there isn't a grade 13 like there is here in Ontario, I was ill-equipped for university in British Columbia. I lacked calculus and some of the other subjects within, say, chemistry and physics. So when I arrived out in British Columbia, mindful that I had great marks coming out of Winnipeg, I immediately got drafted into the rugby team. Varsity tug-of-war team, which took up all my time. So I lacked an educational background. I was playing sports basically full time, and there was a little bit of social activity. I signed up to ballroom dancing, which I thought was very important in order to meet some of the locals. So by Christmas, I bombed academically. I bombed in all of those key subjects for which being an engineer are kind of important. And so I was on release from the Canadian Armed Forces. And I had a number of great supporters. The principal of Royal Roads, Dr. John Graham, he thought I could still succeed. And my military leader, a squadron commander named Dennis O'Brien, he thought I could succeed, partly because I was a good rugby player. So after a number of weeks on release procedure, but playing rugby all the while, they said, hey, what about trying arts? And what about going to the Army as a tanker? And I said, sure, I'll give it a go. And it all kind of worked out. But really, after the difficulty in first year, I really started to thrive in the military college environment. And the way the system was set up, this is back in 1975 to 79 when I attended university, I completed 2 years at Royal Roads in Victoria, British Columbia, and after which I attended Collège Militaire Royal de Saint-Jean because they provided a program in business administration. And I was, again, interested in human resources, management, leadership, but moreover than that, they had a really good football team. And I wanted to leave rugby behind me and go play football, which I did. All the while, during the summer months, I did my basic officer training and then did the training to be an armor officer, basically a commander of tanks. I'm always a cup half full kind of person. I have been inspired by watching generations of Canadians sign up for the Canadian Armed Forces when there was a need. And that is really part and parcel of our history. If you look at any of the conflicts, World War I, World War II, Korea, peacekeeping missions, and my firsthand experience with Afghanistan, I've been inspired by the tens of thousands of Canadians who've signed up and wanted to be something greater than themselves. In addition, I have seen Canadians sign up because the Canadian Armed Forces got a new piece of equipment, an aircraft, a ship, and they wanted to serve on it. And I've seen, I'll just use the example of Afghanistan, people sign up in the armed forces right from the age of 17, 18, all the way through to grandparents signing up in their mid-50s because they wanted part of the adventure. They wanted to prove something to themselves and to others. During the height of the Afghan campaign, recruiting was up across the Canadian Armed Forces, across the country, by 10%, except in 2 provinces, Quebec and Alberta, where the recruiting was up 15%. So I am an optimist, and I believe that under the right conditions, that Canadians will join up if there's a need, and if they see that they can be part of something greater than themselves. So my first exposure to, I'll call it conflict, was as a captain on top of this hill in Cyprus in February of 1989, Stavros Hill. And this was the women's walk home. And we had just left Petawawa, Ontario. Again, February. It was minus 25 in Petawawa. Within 7 days, we're standing on top of this hill, Stavros Hill in Cyprus. It is 88 Fahrenheit. And we are arm in arm as Blue Beret United Nations peacekeepers holding off Turkish riot police from clubbing Greek civilians behind us. And I get hit by an electric cattle prod by a Turkish riot policeman. And I am stunned, I am down, pick myself back up and start saying to this guy, "Give me your number, take your number." And we're gonna hold our line. And again, there are weapons, it is like chaos. That was the first time in conflict, and there were a number more in Cyprus. Fast forward, I'm in Bosnia. I'm in the middle of Bosnia-Herzegovina. It is May and June of 1994. And I'm assigned to a United Nations headquarters, again, Blue Beret, United Nations. And the headquarters for Sector Southwest is in the middle of the confrontation zone. So within a kilometer, we have a demarcation line between the Bosnian Serbs and the Bosniaks, who are a Muslim-based society. And there's minefields all around us. And we're getting shelled, and there's a firefight happening like right around us. And I call my higher headquarters and I say, "I just want to report that we're in the middle of this firefight and rounds coming in." And the higher headquarters says, "Hey, Walt, you're just going to have to deal with it, because here in Sarajevo, like, we're hiding under the desks because rounds are coming down on us again." You know, just a few weeks later, having to go to a meeting in Sarajevo, and a French pilot brings in a little helicopter, a little Gazelle helicopter, and I'm hoping to go straight to Sarajevo, and he says, "I just want to make sure that you really have to go to Sarajevo, because the airport's closed. Our alternate is the Olympic Stadium. It's under sniper fire. And so the only place we're going to land is the tennis court behind the telephone building. And then you're going to have to hop in an armored car and go down Sniper Alley to the headquarters. So I just want to make sure this is not military tourism." And I said, "Hey, pal, I would only go if there's a need." And sure enough, we just made it. Great skill. He landed that helicopter in a tennis court. I hopped in a French Army véhicule reconnaissance blindé, a little armored car, and went down this main road into Sarajevo, and the bullets were flying off. Fast forward, I'm in Iraq. I'm in Iraq in 2004. Spent a whole year in Iraq, January to December. And I still remember visiting General Petraeus, Dave Petraeus. He had his division up in the north, and we're visiting. And on a Sunday morning, nice quiet Sunday morning, and getting onto a helicopter, we took off. And just before we took off, I talked to a bunch of chaplains who were there for Sunday service. And we visited all of the units around, because my responsibility was for all of the combat support units. I had about 35,000 American troops reporting to me at the time. And so I was responsible for a lot of the logistics, the engineering, the hospitals, civil military affairs, and so on. And so we were visiting each of these units that I was responsible for. By the time we got to the hospitals, we rolled in, and they're in the middle of a mass casualty. What occurred was, as we took off, rounds came in, and that group of chaplains and their servers got hit. And here they were on the table. So my view on combat is that it's like a lottery. You're there, and you just hope that things work out. You do your best you can, and you focus on your mission. I would root again my motivation, my inspiration back to my father and my mother, and their love for Canada, because Canada gave them a home. After extraordinary circumstances, the deprivation, the difficulty they had in Europe in war. My father fought for the Free Polish Army. My mother was actually in the German Air Force. So they fought against each other, so to speak, in World War II. But the fact is, Canada took my parents in and gave them a home. So I have this sense of service That's my purpose. And so as I moved along, and again, I never thought that I would become a general. I kind of thought my potential was at captain, and that was kind of my goal, to be a captain. And but things just kind of happened. But this notion of giving back to the country. And as I mentioned earlier on, because I had these operational experiences, I believe that, once you understand what the most junior person in your organization is doing, kind of like my dad, who was a private, then if you understood their context, you could enable their success. You could give them the tools, give them the resources, give them the guidance, give them the flexibility to achieve their mission and to do it successfully. And that's what I try to do at all of the rank levels that I had, especially because of this combat experience. And after having declared success at a junior rank, I realized that success wasn't about me. Success was about enabling the mission success of the most junior folks in the organization. So as I mentioned before, having been an air cadet, I always had put the notion of a captain on a pedestal. Within an air cadet, Army cadet, Sea cadets, generally a captain is the commanding officer, so you put him on a pedestal. Years later, here I am, a captain, and I declared success. However, I saw some of my peers get promoted ahead of time, so to speak, to the rank of major. And some of them came across as being entitled, that they had this privilege. And I still remember one insisting upon a staff car as a major. And whereas when they were a junior officer with me, officer cadet, second lieutenant, captain, you could share your innermost thoughts, you could trust them, you had confidence in each other, and it was great. They got to this rank of major and above, and in my mind, they became really difficult. So in February of 1987, I was on an exercise in the Arctic in Iqaluit. It was so cold. At one point in time, it was minus 104. So cold that the aircraft bringing up our Brigadier General, commander of the base Petawawa and the brigade there, brought up this General Kent Foster, who, by the way, went on to be a 3-star and later the Deputy Minister of Health. And I've given this story in front of him, and he said that's exactly what occurred. But he got stuck with us in Iqaluit. As the aircraft broke down, it was so cold that the windscreen cracked. So we went down to the only, social center in Iqaluit at the time. It was called the Legion. And after having a few pop, we got into a very frank discussion. And I had the courage to say, General, at what rank level does an officer become a twit? And he says, what do you mean? And I kind of laid out what I just did. As a junior officer, they're great. And all of a sudden, they are really difficult to deal with. They become a twit. At what rank level? And in a nanosecond, blink of an eye, he says, Lieutenant Colonel. And I go, why is that? He said, up to that point, moving up to the ranks, it's about the team. But they get to the certain rank of Lieutenant Colonel, which, again, I've told this story in front of numerous public service crowds, and I equate to director. And it's no longer about the team, it's about them. And he says, these folks become ambitious. And so it becomes about them and their rise to the top. And then he said something that was really key. Again, this is in the context of 1987. He said, they're actually 3-star generals who don't get their 4th star. And they consider themselves failures. And I thought about that a lot. And this is why I declared success at that point. And looking back on it, I know who he was talking about in a 1987 context. And as a chief of defense, I had exactly this problem, where people put their own ambition, their own ego ahead of the good of the team, and sometimes ahead of values. Leadership means to me being the best example that you can be to enable others to be successful, to achieve a wider goal. The Chief of Defense Staff is in perpetual motion, receiving direction, strategic direction, national direction from the Prime Minister, in support of the Minister who is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the Canadian Armed Forces, in close partnership with the Deputy Minister, who is the accounting officer, therefore responsible for not only finance but policy and all the other support activities to the operations of the Canadian Armed Forces, working also with the other Deputy Ministers in the community, especially those who have a defense, security, intelligence, foreign affairs interest or mandate, and relating all of that to the most junior people in the organization. I spent a lot of time traveling. I visited Afghanistan 20 times because the situation would change so much and it was our major operation, but I spent time with our ships, our naval crews. I visited our Air Force squadrons, both at home and deployed, domestic operations, whether we were sandbagging, a flooded river, but to be able to see and gain conviction with what the needs were of the most junior folks and giving them the opportunity to talk to me, and then transcending to be able to go meet the Prime Minister. And during my time, I had access to him, direct access to him, and to brief him on the activities of the Canadian Armed Forces and how we were doing outside of operations, whether it be equipment acquisition, personnel policy, transformation of the force, with the support of my minister, again, with an informed deputy. Surprise is a principle of war. You don't want to use surprise on your close friends, your boss, or your juniors. So again, communication being important, but I would try to link the Prime Minister down to the most junior and the reverse to inform the Prime Minister. And this cycle of communications and information was ongoing because I could never predict what would happen next. During my time, not only was Afghanistan a huge operation for us, but we also had the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, supporting the province of British Columbia and the police forces with another 5,500 men and women of the armed forces. We had the operation in Libya, the NATO operation in Libya, and a whole bunch of others. The earthquake in Haiti, we had over 2,000 men and women supporting the operation in Haiti, informing everyone in anticipation of what could occur in the future. And so as chief, I was in perpetual motion and always informing folks. In 1979, I was qualified as a tank troop leader. So 4 tanks with myself, 16 soldiers on NATO duty. At the time it was called West Germany. And I still remember when, at the time, the Soviets went into Afghanistan and we didn't know what was going to happen next. So we all deployed into our combat zones. And as chaotic as it was, in reflection, it was a period of tension, but predictable tension between, at that time, the Warsaw Pact and the West. Fast forward to now, the world is very unstable. I would say with the conflict happening in Ukraine and in the Middle East, the tension in Southeast Asia, the world is much more volatile. And with the proliferation of nuclear weapons, of chemical weapons, I would say the uncertainty has increased, and therefore the risks have increased. I think that it is also very ambiguous, more so than it was when I joined. So I think the situation globally is very dangerous. I think that the Canadian Armed Forces has the equipment that the Government of Canada will give it with the support of civil society. So that's something Government of Canada's got to figure out. I would just say, however, that the need is great. And the predictability of what will happen in the future is gone. And so this is a very troubling period. So as Chief of Defense, again, I had access to the Prime Minister, and he asked me what I would like to do after my service, which I thought was terrific. I mean, very kind for him to ask. And I said that I would really like to be the Deputy Minister of Veterans Affairs. And he wondered why. I said, while serving, I am trying to do everything possible to enable the success of those men and women in harm's way and bring them home to their families. What I really worry is about once they have come home serving in Canada and once they take off the uniform, have we done everything possible to enable their success, to transition to civil society, and to contribute to Canada? I would always worry that we were supporting folks in Afghanistan or Libya or Haiti, and I lost so many to mental health injuries and suicide here in Canada. And so I asked for an opportunity to support those men and women in their transition. I was surprised when the phone call came in and actually was from the clerk saying, we'd like you to be the president of the Canadian Space Agency. And I think I responded, space? Space? Are you sure? You're talking to Walter Natynczyk, someone with a degree that says business administration, but in reality, my professors know the degree is in rugby and football. And they said, yeah. And listen, I thrived. I enjoyed the Canadian Space Agency, being surrounded by extraordinary innovation, intellect, capability, imagination, and recognizing how important space and the use of space is for Canada. I want to thank them for their service. There are many ways to serve Canada. Some people put on the uniform of the Canadian Armed Forces. Some people become police officer, firefighter, other first responders. Some go into the medical field. Some go into private business and they make this country stronger economically. And some provide leadership and essential support to Canadians coast to coast to coast. We're all serving, every one of us. And I must tell you, I followed the public service values when I was deputy. And I would speak about those values because no matter where you are in the structure, if you abide by those public service values, you will provide extraordinary support to Canadians. The notion of respect for democracies, respect for people, integrity, excellence, and stewardship. Again, I retired 3 years ago and someone may have changed those, but the reality is I abided by those. And Certainly at the Space Agency and Veterans Affairs, I would speak about those values to the most junior employees, who, by the way, I would walk around in their office flats and sit in their cubicles and shoot the breeze and thank them for their service. And that's what I'd like to do today. Well done.